Operation Twist. So this was in the news because the RBI, the Reserve Bank of India, is scheduling Operation Twist for July 2nd, right? So this Operation Twist is being done by the RBI for improving liquidity and market conditions. So in this context, we'll try to see what is this Operation Twist, what is its significance, what is its impact on the economy, what are some challenges in this RBI's policy of Operation Twist, and what should be the way forward, right? So to begin with, this Operation Twist, to be said simply, this is simultaneous purchasing of long-term and short-term government securities. This Operation Twist, the definition is simultaneous purchasing of short-term and long-term government securities. Don't worry, we'll discuss each and everything in detail. This is the definition for Operation Twist. Now, what is this? This is basically being done to increase the money supply in the market. The previous classes we have discussed what is the significance of money supply for improving GDP and controlling inflation, right? So money supply is very important in the market in terms of economics. Now to increase this money supply, this Operation Twist is being taken up, right? So even before we discuss the provisions of this Operation Twist, let us first get clarity on what is a government security, because you might have been seeing this term in the economics newspapers. Government securities, these are also known as GSECs, GSECs. So these government securities are in news frequently. So what is this government security? This is nothing but an alternative investment route for the government, right? This is an alternative way how the government can get money from the market. So this government security is nothing but a channel or a route by which government can raise money from the market, the public. So how does this take on? Like if I want to say it in a process wise, government gives a promising paper to an individual saying that value of that paper is say 100 rupees. So that person will be paying 100 rupees to the government and taking that paper, right? So that paper is the government security. So a person has invested 100 rupees and bought that government security from the government, and government has got 100 rupees, right? And government promises that it will pay back the 100 rupees with an interest rate after a particular period of time, right? So this is the working of a government security. As the name suggests, government will take money from the public, promising that it will pay them after a period of time. This is the government security. And government security is nothing but a paper, a sheet of paper, a promise made by the government to the person. So this is a government security. Now there are two types of government securities, short term and long term. Short term means government is raising money from the market for a short period of time. That means it's saying that it will pay back the money which it took from the public within a short period of time, say 30 days or 60 days or 90 days or 1 year, like that, right? This is short term government securities. Long term government securities means more than a year, right? For long period of time, say 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, anything it can be. So for a long period of time, government has time to pay back the money to the public with an interest, right? So this is long term government security. In this way, short term and long term, there are two types of government securities. So this is about government security. Hope everyone has got the clarity. Now what is OMO? Open market operations. You might have seen this term also in economics if you are going through the newspapers. So what is this OMO? OMO stands for open market operations. What happens in this open market operations? The Reserve Bank of India, on the behalf of government, will sell these government securities to the people. Government directly will not be selling these government securities to the individuals. right? The Reserve Bank of India, who is the banker for the government, will sell at the same time purchase these government securities from the market, right? So it will be selling the paper, and also sometimes it will be taking back the paper also by giving the money. So it is a banker for the government. So RBI does this selling and purchasing of government securities in the market. This is called open market operations, OMOs, right? So now what happens when government sells a government security, or what happens when government takes back a government security? This we have to know. So when government is selling a government security, that is nothing but government giving the paper to the people and taking money from them, right? So what happens? Money supply decreases in the market because government is taking the money, right? So when government sells the government securities, it implies government is sucking all the extra money supply in the market, right? So when government securities are sold by the government, money supply reduces in the market. Now what happens if the government is taking back the government securities? Government is taking back the government security means it's paying back money to the people and taking the paper from them, right? Then what happens? It's keeping money in the hands of the people and taking back its paper. So money is coming in the hands of the people and money supply will increase, right? So if the government sells government securities, money supply reduces. If the government is purchasing back the government securities, money supply will increase. These two trends we have to be thorough. So now, why are we discussing all this? Because in this operation twist, simultaneous purchasing of short-term and long-term government securities is taking place, right? So this we will be seeing. So in this way, open market operations are done to control money supply in the market, right? So this is done by Reserve Bank of India. So this is one way how the Reserve Bank of India can increase or decrease the money supply in the market, right? So this is about OMOs. Now coming to the present scenario of the economy, as we can see, two things which people talk about more is investments and consumption demand. If we see investments are decreasing, or the rate of investments is not increasing as the expected rate. Investments are falling down. And also consumption demand is falling down. What is this consumption demand? The rate at which people are consuming, right? The propensity among the people to consume more and more. How willing are the people to consume or spend on things? This is called consumption demand. So these two variables, macroeconomic variables, investments and consumption demand, these two are decreasing, right? The rate is falling, because of which India is being in economic slowdown, right? This is a fact which all of us know. Investments and consumption demand are falling and India is in economic slowdown. Now, what is the solution? To increase the investments and to increase the consumption demand, right? These two are the major components of GDP. Now, how can we increase the investments? Only when we have financial institutions like banks and NBFCs coming forward to give loans, right? Only then investments will increase. So only when banks give more and more loans, investments will increase. That is the first thing. Second thing, how to increase the consumption demand? Only when there is cash in the hands of the people, only then consumption demand will increase. So how can we keep cash in the hands of the people? Only when banks have enough money with them. Only when banks are willing to give loan to the people, right? So giving money to the banks or keeping money with the banks so that they give loans to individuals and investments for industries is one strategy to increase investments and consumption demand, right? So for increasing investments or consumption demand, banks should have enough liquidity or enough money with them, right? So here we are facing a problem. So to solve the problem of economic slowdown, for increasing investments and consumption demand, to keep money in the hands of the banks, we are facing one problem. That is, banks are not willing to give loans, right? Banks are not willing to lend to the people. Why? Because they have a comparative safer investment destination like government. Just imagine when there is government security, when there are government securities, it's better to invest with the government rather than giving loans to the people, right? Giving loan to the government is a safer way because returns from the government is for sure. Rather than giving money to the individuals or industries and they turning into non-performing assets and the banks going into loss, rather than that way, banks are trying to keep more and more money or park more and more money in form of government securities with the government, right? Because government returns are for sure. So compared to individuals, banks are investing in government securities, and that too government that too the banks are choosing long-term government securities, right? Not short-term, long-term government securities. That means for 5 years or 10 years or 2 years or 3 years. For long term, banks are trying to keep the money with government securities rather than giving loans for big infrastructure projects in the market, or for big industries, or for the MSMEs, or for the agricultural sector development. Rather than going for all these things, they are choosing government securities because they are safe. Now to stop this trend, this operation twist is being taken up, right? To make sure banks don't park their money with government, rather they will spend it on the market. To make the banks spend the money which they have with the market, this operation twist is being taken. Now what is actually happening in this operation twist? All the long-term government securities, which the government has given to the market, it is taking back all those government securities, right? It's taking back all those government securities and giving back the money to the banks, right? All the long-term securities which the banks had with the government, it's taking back those papers from the bank and giving the money back to the banks. So now what happens? As the banks, they don't have a safer investment destination now, because the government has taken back its papers and given money. Because now there are no long-term government securities in the market, the bank is now forced to lend to the markets, right? Now it will lend to the private individuals and private industries. This is in one way of pushing the banks to lend to the market rather than to the government securities, right? So this is happening in operation twist. Now how is it useful for us? This is useful for us because now the banks will be looking forward to lend to the market, right? The money which the banks got back, they can't simply keep that money with themselves. They have to make profit out of that money, right? Only then they can pay back to the depositors who deposited money with the banks. So they can't simply keep the money with them. They have to lend it now. As there is no government securities, they will lend it to the market. Money supply in the market will increase. Liquidity in the market will increase. And ultimately, consumption demand and investment will increase, right? With this logic, operation twist is being taken up, right? Now here, the government is purchasing long-term government securities. That means it's taking back the paper and giving money to the people. At the same time, it is selling short-term government securities, right? What is selling short-term government securities? Short-term government securities, it's giving to the people and taking money from them, right? So short-term government securities, usually so much amount is not that deposited in this short-term government securities, right? So short-term government securities, RBI is selling in the market. It is getting some money from it. Using that money, these long-term securities are taken back, right? So in this way, liquidity and money supply is being increased in the market. So this dynamics in economics we have to know. Now then, what is the challenge? Everything is perfect. Now long-term securities are taken back, money is with the banks, so they will be lending to the market, investments will increase, demand will increase. But the problem here is, I'll tell it in a story. Now imagine there is a horse, right? You have taken that horse to a lake. Now you are asking that horse to take water. Unless and until that horse is thirsty, it will not take the water, right? You can at max take that horse near a pool, near a water, near a lake, but it is up to the horse whether to take the water or not. Unless and until it is thirsty, it will not take the water. The same problem is now with our economy also. RBI and the government are trying their level best to increase money supply in the market, to increase liquidity in the market. But people on the other hand are not willing to spend it. People on the other hand are not willing to take loans. Why is this happening? Why is demand not increasing? Because there are a number of structural issues in our economy, right? Simply increasing the money supply will only solve the problem up to some extent, 50%. The other 50% is up to the people. They have to take the loans and spend. Only then consumption demand will increase. They have to take loans and invest. Only then investments will increase. Why is that not happening? Because four major problems are there. First is unemployment problem. Unemployment rate is increasing. Just imagine when an individual is unemployed, he'll not be willing to take a loan and spend it on different products, right? He'll see only if his basic needs are being met or not. So unemployment problem is one major issue. Agrarian distress, right? The distress in the agricultural sector. We know, though agriculture contributes only to 15% of GDP, still till now, 50% of the employment is in agriculture. Now, if agricultural sector is in distress, this 50% of the employment whose livelihoods are dependent on agriculture will also be affected. Now, in that scenario, we can't expect people to take money for investing or spending. So, agricultural distress is also a major reason. Third thing is MSME stress. The micro, small and medium enterprises, even they, after GST, after demonetization waves, and now because of this corona lockdown, and other activities being stopped, these MSMEs are also facing huge crisis, right? This is also one of the reason. And fourth one is migrant laborers crisis. These migrant laborers also, they have gone back to their villages. Now they don't have the economic opportunities once which they had when they were in the cities, and now they are unemployed, right? So these are some structural issues: unemployment problem, agrarian distress, MSME stress, migrant laborers crisis. Because of all these reasons, people are not willing to spend. People are not willing to take the loans, right? Only when we solve these issues, then it is a comprehensive way, or in 360 degrees, we are trying to approach the problem, right? Simply by putting or increasing money supply will not solve the issue, right? People's problems, these problems also have to be solved. But if we see the case of Reserve Bank of India, I mean, the limit of RBI is only up to tackling money supply and liquidity, right? Beyond that, the RBI cannot go. The RBI cannot solve the unemployment problem. It cannot solve the agrarian distress. It cannot solve the MSME stress. It cannot solve the migrant laborers crisis. What the RBI can do is only with money. It will try to increase the money supply. It will try to increase the liquidity. It will try to give more and more loans to the banks. It will try to decrease the interest rate on the loans. These kind of things only can be done by RBI. This is called monetary policy, right? All the things which the RBI can do only revolves around money. So monetary policy deals with this money supply and liquidity. But to solve the problems which we have discussed just now, fiscal policy by the government is required. It is the government which can solve the problem of unemployment, or agrarian distress, or MSME stress, or poverty. All these problems can be tackled by government in a better way than the RBI, right? Government has various ministries, various schemes, right? With all this machinery, these problems can be solved. So this is called fiscal policy. The budget which the government brings up every year is also a part of this fiscal policy, right? So fiscal policy is required from the government. At the same time, monetary policy from the RBI is also required. Only when both these things are done, only when all these issues of the people are solved, only when these structural issues are resolved, only then people will be taking up this extra money in the money supply to take loans or investments. All this will be picking up, right? So only then India will come out of this economic slowdown, right? So monetary policy and fiscal policy, both are required. Simply increasing the money supply in the market will only solve the problem partially.